Hello, Allen High School staff. Welcome to our staff training for the PSAT for the fall of 2019. We will be administering the PSAT to all of our sophomores and our juniors on October the 16th, 2019, just as we have over the last several years. So today we're going to go over the training procedures for that exam and get you ready to administer that test to our kids on that day. Today we're going to go over several things. We're going to talk about the staff duties. What are the different staff duties that are given here on the PSAT date? We're going to talk about the test date and time. We're going to review procedures for the day. We're going to talk about administration policies and how the College Board requires that this test be administered in that standardized way. I'm going to give you a chance to answer questions. We're going to probably come back and have a little short face-to-face section where you guys can ask me questions, or you can always ask me questions via email, and then the training itself will be over. Just want to remind you of the goals of our campus, and so we want to increase the number of concerned adults working with all of our students. And we want to have student-centered systems and structures, and we want our students and staff to give their best effort first time. The information that I'm going to cover here in the training today does not take place of reading your appropriate PSAT manual. There is a lot of information in the manual, and it would be impossible for me to go over the entire thing with you here today. But we are going to take a chance, and we're going to look through the things that are most important, and then I'll also have some items for you to go back and flag, and you will want to go back and spend more time with those when you're working on this by yourself. So let's look at the manual itself. You can see there, that's what the manual looks like. The manual this year is broken into two parts. Part one is the part for the PSAT coordinator, which is me. I will be referencing some things in that session, part of the book, but also that is mainly the part for the people that are going to be the test coordinators, so PSAT coordinators such as myself. Your part for testing staff begins on page 55, and testing staff is anybody that's involved. They really talk about proctors and hall room monitors being the two major things that the College Board, that's what they name the staff members that are involved in testing. We may have some additional things that we do here on our campus as well. So on October the 16th, we want to get our kids here as soon as we can. We'd like to have them, as many of them, if not all of them, here by 8:35, so that we can start our testing as close to 8:50 in the morning as possible. We would like to be able to start as soon as that first bell rings. We will be making an announcement to begin testing for the rooms that are involved in testing, and once that announcement has been made, each room then is going to have its own timing once we begin. Now, since the test is timed, and since the test is timed the same for every room except for a few accommodated rooms, that means that most of us should be somewhat on the same time. Not that we are all on the exact time, but we should be really kind of along those same lines. When we talk about late students, you can only admit a late student into your room if the time portion of the test has not begun. So if you're still going through the pre-administration directions, you're going through that first little part where students are able to bubble things in on their answer sheet before we start, then you can let that student back in. If not, if this test has actually begun, then you're not able to let the student back in and take the test. So staff arrival. We will begin teacher checkout at 7:50 that morning. I will be sending out a reminder to the staff at a later date that will go over the exact procedures of this and where we will use for checkout. Those things have not been determined at this point. We need everybody to have all their materials checked out by 8:35 that morning. We need everybody there and in their rooms and ready to roll by 8:50. So we need you to have your materials picked up from the checkout room by 8:35 that day. Anyone that's going to be assisting with testing will sign in the check-in room even if you're not a test administrator. So anybody that's involved in testing, hall monitors, alternates, things along those lines, you will need to sign in the check-in room, just like anyone that would be giving the exam. So let's talk about the sections of the test and how they are timed. This is covered in a couple of different places in the manual. You will be able to find a little timing chart on page 7 and then a more detailed timing chart on page 108. And the good thing about the chart on page 108 is it goes through all the different variations of the test. So it has the standard timing, which is about 95% of our rooms, but it would also have some accommodated rooms and some longer timings that would be happening in those classrooms. So that chart on 108 is a really good chart for you to know and understand. So the pre-administration is what we will do to start off with the test. That can take, up to around 30 minutes or so. Then the first test is the reading test. The reading test has a 60-minute time limit. Then students will be given a 5-minute break. After their break, they will have a 35-minute writing and language test. And then they will jump right into the math test, no calculator, which is a 25-minute test. Then there's another 5-minute break. So between the two math sections you will see here, you have a 5-minute break. And then the test concludes with the calculator portion of the math test, which is 45 minutes long. But you've got to be very careful and understand that there's two sections of that math test, and one of them students are allowed to use a calculator, and on the on the first part of the math test, they are not allowed to use a calculator, whereas the last part of the math test, the last 45 minutes of the test itself, students can use a calculator. Most of you will be giving the test in a standard room, but there are a number of you that will be administering the test to a group of students that might have an accommodation, or definitely a group of students that have similar accommodations. The manual itself talks about accommodations in several places. On page 12, at the beginning of the manual, there's a little section there called Guide for Testing with Accommodations. That is kind of like the blueprint of how you go about testing with accommodations. Also, later on in the manual, in the middle, in pages 61 to 63, the manual goes over the setup for testing with students with accommodations. And then it talks about accommodated breaks on pages 69 to 70, which is overall in a larger section of the manual about accommodations that is administering tests with accommodations, which is pages 67 to 70. And there's several things in that particular section. If you are one of those individuals who generally helps us with accommodated rooms, be on task and be aware that these are probably going to happen for PSAT as well, and you will want to familiarize yourself with the different things. I will also have special instructions for teachers who have accommodations that are special type of accommodations, not just your standard extended time or breaks or things like that, because we do have some sections with students that have a reader. We have a student who is allowed to use an MP3 recording of the test as opposed to a reader, and those all require different accommodations and different things from testing staff. As we talk about testing staff, our teaching staff may administer the PSAT even if a member of the family is testing that day. That is a change that the College Board made a couple of years ago that really gives schools that are administering the test much more flexibility. The only caveat to that provision by the College Board is that your particular relative could not be in your own testing room. We will have a test proctor or a monitor in all of our testing rooms at all times. We cannot leave students unattended during the test, and that also the College Board policy dictates that we assign proctor being the person that is presenting the test and actually administering the test in the classroom, and then also monitors. The manual goes into details about the security of the test on page 66. So it will go into several things in more detail in the manual, but here are some things I want to point out. You are to prepare your room for testing. If you're not testing in your room, then you're responsible for getting your room ready for testing if someone else is testing in your room. Guys, this goes without saying, but do not deviate from the script. Follow the script as it is written. Actively monitor like you do for STAR or any of your own exams in the classroom. We really need to watch out for non-allowable devices like phones, smartwatches, watching kids on the no calculator part of the math exam, making sure that they're not using a calculator. There's a part in the manual that gives you some more information, and it's called key information on the bottom of page 67, and those gives you some different page numbers that you can go back and reference to. Make sure that we are monitoring during breaks, during the 2 different 5-minute breaks during the classroom. That is not supposed to be meant for like a free-for-all section. We've got to monitor those breaks. When you're accounting for materials, it talks about this in greater detail on page 65. That means that we are going to use our particular procedures that we use during STAR testing for check-in and check-out. You will be responsible for counting test booklets when you check them out. Before you distribute them in your classroom, you want to make sure that they're still all there. After you collect them from students, you got to collect and count them again, and then count them again one more time when you're checking them in. This is all just checks and balances to assure that we have all the things that we need and all the materials that you need in the classroom, and then also all the materials back when the exam is over with. As it pertains to copying or communication among students during the test, it talks about this a couple of different places in the manual. It talks about it on page 24, and it also refers back to it on page 66. The best way that we can do is to just actively monitor like we do for any other exam that we give here on campus. You need to be on the lookout for roaming eyes, making sure that kids have their eyes on their own paper. The College Board does give us the opportunity to offer a warning. So, if you have a student that you are suspected that they are cheating, but you're not sure, the manual tells you to move the student first, and then if you're able to verify it, then that's when you would go into more of a dismissal thing. There are irregularity guidelines for copying or cheating during the test, and those guidelines can be found on page 126 in the irregularity section of the manual. Seating, it's gone over several spots in the manual. It's talked about on page 17. It's also talked about on page 26 and 64. Some highlights here is that you're to use random seating. That is the College Board rule for all their exams. The students are not supposed to be seated with some kind of alphabetical order or things along those lines. You are welcome to plan that in advance because those rosters will be out there for you to be able to view when we get a little bit closer to test time. And so if you want to look at your kids who are in your room, you can plan that out in advance. Most especially, and a very, very important rule is that we cannot allow students to seat themselves. They are not to pick their own seats on a College Board exam. You will be able to use the seating chart that's in the test town form. But also, if you'll notice that on the very back of the manual, there is a copy of the seating chart, and you're able to use this as a draft to work out your seating chart or to have any notes that you need to make about it on test day. But we will use the test town form as our official seating charts that we will keep on file. Prohibited aids, it's talked about on pages 24 and 25, and then again on page 71. Once again, a warning may be offered, but you're going to have some judgment there as it pertains to like a phone. A phone going off in a classroom probably would not be a dismissible offense, but whereas a student getting out the phone and trying to use the phone would be a dismissible offense. So you've got to have some leeway, and you just got to use your best adult judgment on some of these things. These are the things that students are allowed to have with them at their desks. They are able to have their test booklet. They're able to have their answer sheet. They're able to have a number 2 pencil and a calculator for the math calculator portion. The rest of the test, when they don't have the calculator needed, then they probably should not have those with them at that time. And I do want to point out one other thing on page 65 in the manual while we're talking about phones. We, as a campus, are not going to be collecting phones from students. We're going to tell students to turn them off and put them in their bags and leave their bags at the front or the back of the room. And so on page 65, when it's talking about collecting students' personal belongings, they give you option 1 and option 2. We're going to be option 2, where it says if collection of student devices is not permitted, have students keep devices in their bags and place their bags on the side of the room. That is going to be our policy as it pertains to personal devices during the test. Calculators is only allowed on the last section of the test, the math test calculator portion. The manual gives you what acceptable calculators are available on page 114, so you can go through that and look. Most of our students are going to have calculators provided to them by the school. We will have graphing calculators for juniors, and we'll have some scientific calculators available for our sophomores. We're going to want you guys to encourage as many of our students as possible to bring their own calculators and use their own calculators, especially our sophomores, because we do not have enough calculators. Those scientific calculators, we don't have enough of them for everyone in the class. So the test is set up to where any math problem can be solved without a calculator, but it is allowed. And so the suggestion is, especially sophomore teachers, start talking to your students now about bringing their own calculator on testing day. They are definitely able to use that. Page 26 talks about the monitoring of usage of calculators and other devices, and it also talks about what to do in the case of a malfunction. Test taker policies. We require, and this College Board requires as well, that students remain quiet during testing and may not share any kind of content with anybody else. You know, this number 2 is kind of a big thing. This is something we deal with in SATs and ACTs. Students must only work on the section being currently timed, and you're going to have to watch for that. This test is frantic a little bit for some students because they're asked to answer many more questions in a shorter time period than some of our students are accustomed to. And so there's going to be that temptation to go back and try to answer questions that they didn't finish. And so we need to be very cognizant of that as a staff and make sure that we look at that. Students must use a number 2 pencil. The College Board strictly disallows the use of mechanical pencils on any of their exams. They must put their answers on the answer sheet. If they put their answers in the test booklet, they're not going to get any credit for answers there. So we need to talk to our students about the timing in class, get them prepared for that so that they're aware that, you know, a lot of our students are used to the old star kind of way of, you know, going back and circling answers in the book and then coming back and then bubbling in later. And that's not necessarily the best advice we can give them on a PSAT or, for that matter, the SAT or the ACT. Timing and breaks. Once again, it talks about timing and breaks on page 108. Keeping accurate timing is very paramount. That's one of the major irregularities that we deal with, is not keeping correct time. We're not used to, as teachers, giving a test that has multiple shorter time sections. We're used to having those big blocks to give them, whether it's a classroom test or even the STAR test, you know, is given over a longer period of time. Like we said before, there's 2 breaks that the College Board schedules into the test, 2 5-minute breaks. Students are allowed to take unscheduled breaks like bathroom breaks or water breaks or things along those lines, but they don't get that time back. They don't get to make up that time if they use the restroom or something along those lines. A timing chart, which is also found after page 108. There's several pages of the timing chart that pertains to each individual script. If you will use that timing chart, it will help you keep accurate time. It's definitely something that I would recommend you all use to help make sure that you're on target. You're able to actually see exactly where your timing should end up for each one of the sections by using that those charts that you can find there, and they start on page 109. In your classroom, It talks about what you need to post on pages 55 and 64. The main thing is we are to post our own school address, our own school code, which is 440077. I see an error here. We will not be using testing room codes this year, so you can mark that out, but you will be doing our start and stop times. So it'll be our school address, the school code, and start and stop times. As students are coming in, make sure that you're verifying that your students are on the roster. The people that are coming to your room, make sure you're verifying that they are the ones and the individuals that are supposed to be in your classroom, just like we do for any other test. And you will seat them according to the seating guidelines that can be found on pages 17, 26, and 64. And once again, remember, late arrivers may be allowed in if the timed part of the test has not begun. So once again, if you are still in the pre-administration part, the bubbling part of the test, students are allowed to come in. If you have started the test itself, then not so much. Pre-administration. We're going to go through this and try to spend some time here. The one teacher that's been given the homeschool room will start on page 55, and I will sit down with that teacher individually and go over that with them. Everybody else, you're going to begin on page 58 within the manual. And that's going to be the things that you're going to go through. It's actually on the bottom part of page 58. It says script for pre-ID labels, because we do participate in bulk registration, which gives us pre-coded labels that we affix to the answer sheets, and that does eliminate the need to complete a good portion of the demographic information and saves us time on the actual exam day. I do want to point out on page 59, kind of in the middle of the first column, it talks about what to do if you have a student without a usable label. It gives you some guidelines, and we'll be able to help you there if you have a student who has a problem with their label or doesn't have a problem with their label or doesn't have a label at all. Also, please note that we will have some students that don't have labels that we in the testing office will pre-code ourselves to get them ready for the exam day so that they can just go along with the instructions as everybody else. We had to turn in this file pretty early, and so anyone that enrolled after a pretty early date in the beginning of the year, we're going to have to complete those answer sheets for them ourselves here on campus. So, following along on page 58 as we're going through the script, you're going to say the statements that are in the green boxes. That's what you have there. You're going to have some skipping. If you'll turn along like you're following on page 58 is where it starts. On page 59, you're following along the script, and make sure like field 5 is something you're supposed to say. Field 5 relates to the National Merit Scholarship Program, and we want to make sure that all our students complete that part. It's very important that we get that information so that we can turn that in and make our students eligible for the National Merit competition. On pages 60, there are some things that you're able to skip. You're able to skip the fields 9 through 13, the box that talks about that. You're able to skip the box that talks about item 14. So fields 9 through 13 is all the address information that's on the label. Field 14 is student ID numbers. That's also on the label. And then item 16 talks about international testers, which doesn't pertain to us, so we can skip that one as well. The PSAT student answer sheets instruction booklet. This is something that the College Board has shipped with the test to help for students to be able to complete some more of the demographic information. That's for items 16 through 21, and it also includes items 22 and 23. That's the optional information that we'll talk about more here in just a few minutes. When you get through the information, field 23, when it's talking about going through field 23 on page 61, you will actually then skip to page 71 in the manual. So that gets you through the first part of the pre-administration. So that's going to get you into the actual testing for the day. So you'll pick up in the section on page 71 that says when you are ready to begin, say. And so you will follow along page 71, 72. Just so you know, you can skip the circle that talks about collecting personal belongings on page 72. It's a green circle with the letter A in it. You don't need to follow along that. You'll follow along the script all the way to page 73, but you can skip the last box on the bottom of page 73 because it doesn't pertain to what we're doing. Once you get through page 73, you're going to go on to page 75, where it talks about distributing test booklets. On the back of each of the test booklet, we are asking that we have our kids write their name, our school code, and their English teacher name, class period. The booklet itself on page 75 tells you to write the name and the school code, which is something that's in the instructions. We have added the English teacher name, class period. That helps us in terms of sorting the booklets and getting them back to the teacher so that they can use them when students with the scores come back. Very important that we get our kids to do this, and very important that our kids write it legibly. They can write their name and their classroom, their teacher's name legibly as well. Some more items as you're following along through with the manual on page 76 and 77. You're just reading the instructions as given. I will tell you that students do not have to complete the test book serial number. That is item C, or field C. That is only for Saturday testing, and we are a Wednesday test administrating session. We will not be using testing room codes anymore. That was a mandatory thing a few years ago, and the College Board has made that optional. And so field D we will skip, and we do not have any optional codes as well, so they can skip field E. So to kind of summarize the pre-administration parts, you can see this is a pretty good slide here. These are the items that you will be skipping on the answer sheet on test day because these items are already on the label. So student name, which is item 1. The information about the school, items 2 and 3. The school code is item 4. Their date of birth, item 6. Their grade level, item 7. Gender is item 8. Address is item 9. City, state, zip code, 10, 11, and 12. Country code, all of our students will not be participating there. Student ID is already on their label. That's item 14. Ethnic group, and that's already completed as part of our uploaded file. Email address is item 22. Serial number, field C. Test room code, field D, and optional code, field E. I know that sometimes this slide causes some confusion, but the best thing you can do is probably just to print this slide out and just know that those are the things that students do not have to complete on the answer sheet on test day. That will slow you down significantly if you don't follow the directions and try to have your kids complete these. These items are already on the label, and that's why we do bulk registration, is so that we don't have to do these fields. Once again, fields 16 through 23 are optional field questions that require that a special instruction sheet booklet that's going to be in the testing bin. If you have a student who does not want to complete those sections, that is not a big deal because, once again, it's optional demographic information. So it's one of those things that you just don't have to spend a lot of time on. Students will need to complete the following fields on their answer sheet, so make sure that they get number 5, the National Merit Info, like I said before, very, very important. Number 15 is the Student Search Service. They need to opt in or opt out of Student Search Service. If they want to know more about Student Search Service, you can let them know that the College Board uses Student Search Services to connect students with possible colleges or also some possible scholarship information. So it is totally up to them if they want to opt in to that. They will need to do the form code and the test ID. Those are fields A and field B. That's very important. That's also on the back of the test booklet, and they can fill that in on their answer sheet. Okay, so the test administration scripts themselves. If you are administering the test in a standard time room, that's going to be 79 to 82. If you are administering the test in a 100% extra time room, that's 82 to 87. 50% extra time rooms, 87 to 91. And then script 4 is standard time with extra breaks, 91 to 95. So depending on what classroom you have, that would be the particular script that you would use. And also the individual who has the student with the MP3 testing will also have a different script, and I will talk to that person individually. Irregularities. All the different irregularities that the College Board has put together can be found in the irregularity chart on pages 122 to 131. If an irregularity occurs, we're going to follow the resolution path listed in the irregularity chart. The chart there gives us great detail about what the College Board wants and expects us to do when these things happen, and so we're going to follow the rules and regulations that are provided to us by the College Board as indicated in the manual during this section. If we do have an irregularity occur, the first thing you're going to do is consult your manual. If you're not sure, please ask someone and we will get someone there able to help you. You're going to complete the generic irregularity form in your folder. Every folder will have a generic irregularity form. You're going to put any of the affected materials, answer sheet, test booklet on top of your bucket with your irregularity form from your folder. And if, after we go through the irregularities, we find that that is a reportable irregularity that we need to send into the College Board, I will call you back to complete the official irregularity report or irregularity report form from the College Board. Homeschooled students, we will have a group of homeschool students with us as we do every year. They are all going to be in the same room, and they will have a teacher that I will talk to and work with, and that teacher will have special instructions for some different completion and different answer sheet information that these students need to provide because they do not have pre-coded labels. Other procedures, prepare your room for testing in advance. So do that in ahead of the actual test day. That will save you time on test day. And like I said earlier, if you're not testing in your room but somebody else is testing in your room, prepare your room for testing. So get your desks put in rows and facing the front of the room. Make sure you have a clock. If you don't have a working clock, you need to email me and Debbie Cornwell so we can work on getting you a clock. I recommend and strongly suggest that you all bring with you a watch or have some kind of other timepiece available with you on test day. It is a kind of a district idea that we don't project the time. But we do have the clock in the room, and we do need to have a backup piece. In the case that we might have a student that becomes ill in your classroom, they can stop testing to go see the nurse, but they don't get that time back. If we get to a point of which a student is sent home by the nurse, then we will contact the student's family to find out whether or not the test will be sent in for scoring or whether or not the test will be voided. Materials check-in, just give you some basic information. The test itself is 2 hours and 45 minutes. Like I said, the coding, the pre-administration part of the test will take around 30 minutes, and then there's also 10 minutes of breaks. So you're looking at, a good 3.5 hours for this test to be done. Materials will be turned into a room to be determined. It'll be the same room that we checked out materials from during the morning. Like I said, as we get closer to time, I will have further information on that, and I will make sure that every one of you as the staff gets that information. In our folders, we will have a checklist of duties. This is something that we've done here on our campus for a number of years. This is something that we ask that you turn in when you return your test materials. It's a really nice little chart that's going to keep you on task and make sure that you are completing the items that you need to complete to assure that you're going to have a smooth test administration session. That's why we provide them. That's why we ask for you guys to complete them. So some things that you're going to have in there is like a reminder to do your seating chart, reminders to have the students complete the specific things on their answer sheet, like the test ID and things along those lines. It's going to be a reminder for you to check student IDs when they come in, rebundling pencils, and I know that sometimes that's a hassle for you guys, but just really if you can rebundle our pencils back in those stacks of 10, it really helps significantly from when we take those back and use them for other exams. When you're packing up your bin to turn in, this is the order that we would like to have the materials turned in. So going from bottom to top, the first thing you're going to put is all your unused booklets on the very bottom of the bucket. Then on top of that, you will put your used books. So all your books will go together. Completed answer sheets will go on top of that. Your unused or absent students will go on top of those. Your answer sheets for your students with accommodations. So if you had any student with a classroom accommodation, that would go on top. And then the folder goes on top of that with your white attendance roster on top of everything else. So it really helps us when we're checking materials in. If you guys can really follow this procedure, keep those items in the order that we've asked for and listed here, it really does make a significant difference. On test day, we will have hall monitors. We will not have separate bathroom monitors, so our hall monitors and bathroom monitor will kind of serve double duty as our bathroom monitors. You're going to have an assigned duty station if you are a hall monitor. Please do not leave that station for a long period of time. You are there to help provide teachers different breaks. We don't have a ton of you there available, and so if someone's missing, it really causes an issue. It makes it where we can't provide the breaks for the students and for the teachers that are in the classroom. Teacher breaks, guys, I know that these tests are long and you need to have your breaks, and we encourage and suggest that you do that, but your breaks need to be relatively short because there's a good chance that your teacher mate beside you needs a break as well, and as long as if you're taking a longer break, it keeps that teacher from having their break. And like, really important, don't request a break right before the end of a section. You know, your timing and keeping your timing in your classroom. Please don't ask that we have a relief monitor come in right before the end of the section where they would be ending a section and beginning the next one. Our schedule for the day, like I said earlier, we're going to begin checkout at 7:20 in the morning. So we will be ready to roll and have materials checked out to you guys at that time. Actually, that should say 8:20. I didn't fix that, so that should say 8:20. Scratch that, 8:20. 8:20. I apologize for the confusion on the teacher checkout time. We will have bins ready to check out at 8 o'clock that morning. So once again, that's going to be 8 o'clock that morning. I apologize for my previous error that I had stated here just a few seconds before. We will have our students arriving on campus at 8:35 so that we can move them to their testing rooms. Like I said, we would like to begin instructions as close to 8:50 as we can. That should put us being done in all our testing rooms and our standard time rooms by 1 o'clock, where we'd have plenty of time for you guys to eat lunch and then dismiss to fourth period at 1:35. Lunch, we will be eating lunch in the classroom. So all of our sophomores and juniors will need to bring a sack lunch with them on that day. So those of you that have sophomores and juniors in class, you need to be announcing that and hitting them up with it, putting it in Canvas, putting it in Skyward so that they know it's coming. Also, if they want to order a sack lunch from the cafeteria, we do have that availability as well. There is not a paper form, but they can go on the assessment portion of the Allen ISD website and they can order a sack lunch there. And we will also probably place that in other places on the website to make it easier to be found. Our seniors on that day will take D-lunch, so all seniors will take D-lunch regardless of where they have been displaced on that particular day of the test. So in conclusion, please email me if there is a question that you have about the test, about the format, about this particular training, anything that I said during today that could have confused you. I do thank you all for your dedication to your craft. You don't know how awesome it is to walk around these halls and see the amazing teaching that goes on in this building every day. And then also on test day, how you guys really help out and make such a big difference and take care of your business so well and so professionally on a test day. I can't tell you enough how much you are all appreciated. You are all doing the work of the Lord on these days, and we just greatly appreciate everything that you do. But also, please don't hesitate to come in and ask me questions. My office this year is located in the College and Career Center, so I'm pretty easy to be found. So just come see me down there if you have questions, and we appreciate your time for today. Thank you.